Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Erin here with Nick Pinault, a friend that I met this summer at a conference. Lives out of Montreal and is a health journalist. And so happy to have you on, Nick. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Erin. It's lovely to do a live. It's very like usually I do podcast interviews and whatnot, but now I cannot make any mistake. So the pressure is on. No, it's lovely.
No pressure. But the cool thing about this is if you're watching right now, you can jump in with questions and we'll try to respond as best as we can. And if you're catching the replay, you're still welcome to leave a comment and we'll try to take a look and get back to you as soon as possible. Sure. So by all means, if you're watching, let us know your thoughts or if you have any questions. So Nick's an expert on EMFs and how that impacts our health and how we can protect ourselves. So that's what we'll be chatting about today. And especially, he told me he's got some interesting research on the links between cell towers and people who are suffering with migraines, and maybe I don't know, did you find like if people moved that they saw an improvement, or what is the correlation or the link that you're reading about?
So Magda Havish, she's a researcher at the Trent University in Toronto, and she studied something called EHS, electro hypersensitivity. So it's basically those people who can actually feel sick when they're exposed to EMF. So EMFs, just to give a bit of a history, they're electromagnetic fields, and these are the wireless signals that are emitted by stuff that's wireless, like cell phones. The computer I'm using right now is on a Wi-Fi network. This is another type of EMF, and also Bluetooth, anything. So if you have a Bluetooth watch, this is also using wireless signals. And people seem to, a fraction of the population, around 3 to 5%, seem to have very severe symptoms of EHS. So it means that they're basically allergic to signals. Just like people can have multiple chemical sensitivity, which means that they can just smell the perfume from your detergent that you do laundry with, and they can get sick. So these people are pretty much like celiac that react to just a little bit of gluten. Well, these guys, EHS, they react to just a little bit of signal and they feel really ill. But Magda Havish explains that there's about 35% of the population in reality that has mild to moderate symptoms of EHS. So oftentimes these people can have different things that are happening in their life, and they don't realize it's linked to cell phone use or to EMF. So for example, in one study, a Spanish study in 2002, looked at people who lived near a cell tower. And the top 3 symptoms that people reported as they got closer and closer to the tower, they looked at 300 meters, 100 meters, 50 meters from the tower. And the top 3 symptoms were fatigue, sleep disturbance, so insomnia, which is so common these days. People just can't get their shut-eye. And then headaches or migraines was the number 3. So it was very, very common. It got more and more common as people lived closer to the cell phone. So it means basically they were exposed 24/7 to a higher level of, in Europe, they often call it electrosmog. So imagine a pollution that you don't see, right? But it's everywhere in the air. And if you live near a cell phone tower, it could be one source. But a closer source that's even more concerning to me as a researcher and as an author on the subject is your cell phone. Because a cell phone is essentially a small cell phone tower. It communicates with a tower back and forth. So there are also links between people who suffer from migraines and cell phone use. So the more they use their cell phone, the more they report having headaches or migraines. And there are a couple of science explanations behind it, but let me know how far you want me to go. But basically, this is the idea. So basically, if you suffer from migraines or headaches, yes, dehydration could be one of the culprits that I see in my own life, but there's probably a ton of other culprits that you address on your work, Erin. But cell phone use and even just exposure to a lot of EMFs could also be one of the causes.
Well, I think that's, that can be one reason, but you're probably not going to convince anybody to just like throw their phone away right now. We're kind of deep down the rabbit hole as far as that's concerned, and
yes,
our addiction to things. So do you have any ways to mitigate that, or
Yes, yes.
I mean, without just like saying, okay, I'm not going to use a cell phone anymore?
Yeah, well, I will not stop using my cell phone. I need it for work. I have my computer right here. When it comes to cell phone use, EMFs, the closer you are, the more danger you're exposed to, or the more signals. So here you are 100%, and at 2 feet, just here, you're about 5 to 10% of the signal. So it falls off in an exponential manner. So that's good news. It means that if you're talking on the phone, you can use these. Yeah, and Aaron both use the Apple earbuds. You can have this, and you put your phone 1, 2 feet away from you, and you've eliminated 95% of the dangers right there, and of your risk of getting headaches. When it's right here, having the emitter right next to you here, basically it affects your brain in a way that just the World Health Organization in 2011 has linked that to cancer. That's a 2B carcinogen. Some people argue it's not no big deal. Oh, it's just 2B. Well, it's a carcinogen. So let's at least listen to it and say, and do something about it, which is be cautious and kind of reduce your exposure. So if you tend to talk on a cell phone for more than a few minutes every day, just take this habit of having earphones and that are plugged in. And some people would ask me next, Nick, is Bluetooth better? This is a common question, right? In reality, Bluetooth uses the exact same signal as a cell phone. It's the same frequency, lower power. However, it's deeper into your brain because you plug it inside your ear. So in one case, one EMF expert I follow has measured a Bluetooth headset that was actually 5 times more strong than a cell phone itself. So in that case, it wasn't a good idea to have this headset, but it's hard to tell how much your Bluetooth headset is emitting. So that's why, just to be cautious, I mean, why replace wireless with more wireless when you're trying to avoid the signal? It doesn't make sense.
These headphones, I plug them in.
Yeah, exactly. So just headphones or speakerphone, but it depends on if you want to annoy your neighbors around you.
And annoy the person on the other side of the phone, right? Exactly. It never really sounds like it. What about, like, does it make a difference? Something I always tell people is to put their phone on airplane mode at night. It's just like such a simple thing to do. Like maybe you want to listen to music, or I like to listen to podcasts, but does switching it to airplane mode like make any difference?
It is great. It is great. If you switch it to airplane mode, you also gotta manually remove the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on an iPhone, at least, because by default, sometimes you'll switch to airplane mode and then the Wi-Fi will be on. Well, in that case, you're exposed to another type of signal, or Wi-Fi, but that's, again, similar to what you're trying to avoid. So removing all these little icons at night, making sure your phone is not emitting, is a great step. Some parents tell me, you know what, Nick, I get you, but my teenage son is out tonight and I won't sleep all night because now he cannot call me. And I understand that. So in that case, I recommend putting the phone away in another room, or let's say the other side of your bedroom, if possible, with the sound function on at maximum. So that way you'll get woken up in case of emergency. And I know that's important. And I know that a lot of people, they don't have landlines anymore. So it's kind of their only mean of communication in case of emergency. So just put it away as much as possible, and people report sleeping way better. I don't know if you have heard such things, but my own mom just a few months ago told me, Nick, I can't sleep at night. And I was authoring a book on the subject. You become a bit paranoid, I guess, but I was like, well, do you happen to have your cell phone near your head? And she's like, yeah, I've just started using it as my alarm clock 2 weeks ago. A lot of people are doing that. And that's classic. And she wasn't aware that a cell phone, even though you're not actively talking on it or downloading something, it's always pinging back the tower. So when it's next to your head, the signal is always on. There's always EMFs in the air near your head. And it's basically like sleeping and having someone poke you in the head every 5 seconds. And you're half asleep, half awake. And your REM sleep, that's a more restorative stage of your sleep cycle, usually goes away and you won't be able to recall your dreams. So if you put your cell phone in airplane mode and you realize, I started dreaming again, this is a very good sign that you're getting healthy sleep, and that it's not deranged by these signals.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things I've read that you can do, but these are just two very simple things that cost hardly anything and
exactly
really impact our lifestyle a whole lot, that everybody should be doing a lot. I became more aware of this. I had kind of a crazy experience this last year. I was living, so normally I live in Seattle and kind of like the suburbs and stuff like that, so it's probably like medium to high level of cityness and technology around me. But I was this past year I lived in the financial district in a high-rise downtown in Singapore, and like this huge building, and I got to a point where I was always feeling just like I couldn't calm down, even if I was meditating or listening to nice music or trying to do some self-care and stuff like that. I couldn't calm down and feel relaxed. I always felt on until I had two like hiking trips to the Himalayas. So like the opposite spectrum, right? As far like no cell reception, just like completely quiet and everything like that. And just the contrast of how quickly I felt better on all levels. Like I had been suffering with a lot of different symptoms I kind of attributed to like maybe some mold or just stress and things like that, but they just disappeared when I was out there, like far away from the city and stuff like that. And then I had to come back, and it came back almost immediately, all these problems. So I never really thought of myself as like a hypersensitive person or something like that. But when you have that big contrast, it makes me think it's the same with sleep. If you're sleep deprived for a long time, you don't even know how bad it is. Or I was telling my mom this analogy earlier, like if you're somebody who drinks alcohol all the time and you're always kind of feeling sluggish and hungover, you don't even know how good you can feel until you get like a real break from it. So if the reason I'm going down this track is like maybe somebody does live near a cell tower and they don't really know how it's impacting them. Do you ever like talk to people like, you don't have to move right away, but let's find out how much better you could feel if you go like stay with a relative for a few weeks? How long does it take to?
Usually it doesn't take a long time. For me, I have realized that normally I had the Wi-Fi router on all night because it was just like everyone is just emitting 24/7. And eventually, writing a book on the topic, I'm like, well, I gotta walk my talk, and let's close down the Wi-Fi router. And all of a sudden, my sleep improved so much. I'm like, okay, no, this is a fluke. This might be all in my head. I'm gonna open it again. And then I didn't sleep good, and then I opened it again. And kind of going back and forth, I realized, wait a minute, it's not my head. It seems that I'm sensitive to whatever, like my sleep cycle or sensitive. So it can take one day. If you feel really, really, really good, let's say going in nature or in the countryside for just one night or 2 nights, well, it's not just EMFs, of course, it's air pollution, it's overall stress. There's a lot of factors there to consider. But I think that EMFs is a new factor in the last 15 years. 15 years ago, no Wi-Fi networks, no neighbors on the subway train playing on their phones and downloading of HD video. So it's getting worse. People in cities are getting more and more stressed. And basically, you put it perfectly. It's basically like cellular stress, the way I put it. It's just another toxins is there. The hard part is that you do not smell it. There's no alert for smog, for electrosmog. There is for the air quality and whatnot in cities, like, oh, do not go outside, and this is kind of scary already, but you don't hear about electrosmog and the fact that, for example, in Toronto, in Canada, just a couple-hour drive from Montreal here, where I am right now, it's one of the worst cities on the planet when it comes to cell phone tower placement. In downtown area, they're all over the place, and it's not recognized that these can cause problems. So even though I told you that a couple studies have looked at correlations, the industry and the government are still they're taking a lot of time to take a decision, because it is a huge financial decision to say, okay, we're going to remove the antennas and place them elsewhere and whatnot. So there's a lot of money to be made, and I don't believe in huge conspiracy. I believe that when there's money to be made, everything is so slow. So in the meantime, between when things really change on a policy level and now, it's going to take 10, 15 years, 20, hopefully less. I'm optimistic, but in the meantime, you got to act by yourself. So that means when it comes to a cell phone tower, I mean, what can you do? Well,
can you do other than moving? I don't want maybe wake up and move your whole life, but
yeah, I mean, you can, but it's hard to tell. What I advise people that maybe are concerned about a cell phone tower, they see it right next to their bedroom window, I would hire a professional that's called a building biologist. And if you type building biologist in your area, you'll find them. They're all over North America and Europe too. And these people have professional level instruments to measure electrosmog. And they can even, if let's say there's a tower outside your window, they can shield your window using special materials. And it will cost a couple $100, but you might feel very well and be able to live in your environment. But depending on how sensitive you realize you are, you might have to take action. Just like if you live in a house that has been infested by mold, right?
Yeah.
If you realize that and you realize, wait a minute, this is the reason I'm sick, and the house cannot be fixed, well, at some point you got to take a decision. So, but this is an extreme idea. For most people, it's just that I think EMFs just affect them every single day a little bit. But they don't know that it's related. And as you said, when you start eating healthy and then you have pizza, you're like, oh my God, what happened? Like, I am destroyed and it wasn't worth it. It's the same thing. If you go in a very, very low EMF environment in the middle of the forest for a week, come back to the city, you're like, oh my God, this is such a stressful environment. The adrenaline rushes. It is just, and if you're sensitive, it will be even worse. Some people just start having this brain fog and cannot concentrate, for example.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. The way I usually explain migraines and headaches to people is that it's just a symptom of like the total stress load on your body. So there's different factors, right? EMF could be one, mold could be another one, food sensitivities is another one. And then if you add on top of that, like, you know, gluten or anything else, then you just have that one little thing that happens at work that just puts you over the edge and like stresses you out, and then you get a headache or a migraine. So all these things are just lowering the internal load on you so that you have more tolerance to, let's say, food triggers or the thunderstorms or jet lag, the things that you know are going to happen eventually, but you want to lower that baseline stress. And I think EMF is just a good example of you know, something to start learning about. I think I dismissed it for a long time because it sounded kind of wacky or like I mean, it's new. Well, you know, it's being debated. It's trying to be dismissed by a lot of parties. Like you said, there's financial interest, so it's easy for it to get pushed away. But I think it's time to start learning about it. And you have a very well-written and entertaining book that I'm gonna pop up the link here for.
Thank you. Well, I wrote the book really for the layperson. It contains the science. Sure, you learn, okay, if you think that it's all wacky, you'll see hundreds of studies in there and you realize quickly enough that it's not. I spent thousands of hours trying to decipher that, but the most important part of the book is really how to take action. So these things that we chatted about today, like using a headset, but there's more and more things that you can do. Most of them are free and easy, and it's really understanding this problem, especially when it comes to exposure to children, for example. I think it's so important because we don't know what the consequences will be in the next generation, honestly, because it is fairly untested compared to what people think. They think it's all tested, but we didn't understand the science when we put these on the market, unfortunately. And now it's always backtracking. You know, all these things go with asbestos and DDT and trans fats. We put something out there and then, oops, sorry, we made a mistake. But in the meantime, people get injured, so to speak. So it's how to protect yourself now without having, well, hence the title, non-tinfoil, without having to get crazy about it, to start screaming or what. I tend to have a more balanced approach, and I think this is the only way we can also spread awareness. If we are too alarmist about it, even though the topic is very serious, got to be a little bit lighter about it and try to get the message across.
Yeah, that's what got my attention, and I think that's part of the reason why I keep wanting to read, because as soon as something's like over the top, like, oh my gosh, you're all going to die tomorrow if you don't like buy all my products and take action, then you get a little skeptical. But this book isn't like that at all. It's very easy to read and makes you want to learn more and stuff like that. So definitely recommending people here check it out, and appreciate you taking all the time that it must have, and you must have invested just to learn all of this, much less like actually come up with a really good, well laid out, well thought out book. I mean, that's amazing.
Thank you. Well, it was a long work, but I'm glad to have done it, and now I want to spread the awareness and make sure that people. It's so ridiculously easy to protect yourself, just like not using a cell phone near your head. But before you read that on cell phone package inserts, it's gonna take a few years, and in the meantime, just like it's gonna take more years before the government finally catches up to healthy eating the way I think it should be done. So we know how these things go. You gotta take action on your own a little bit, and it doesn't require you to stop using your phone or technology. So this is what I like about it. It's simple.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Thank you again. If you've been listening and you want to learn more, go to nontinfoilemf.com. The website's here on the screen, and I'll put it in the comments to make it easy for you to get your copy of Nick's awesome book. And if you do have questions later on, just put them in the comments, and I'll come back in a few hours and tomorrow and check them out and see if we can help you out with that. Good deal?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Erin.